Hi.
Great.
Hi.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jen. I'll be your host for this 1 hour-long session. I'm part of the team at the National Aphasia Association, a nonprofit organization dedicated to advocating for people with aphasia, their families, and care partners. This is Ask the Author with Debra Meyerson and Steve Zuckerman, who will be chatting with us about her book, Identity Theft: Rediscovering Ourselves After Stroke. Deborah is a professor at Stanford. In 2010, Deborah had a stroke. By her side was her husband Steve Zuckerman. The book follows Deborah's remarkable story of survival and recovery. Deborah writes about setting realistic expectations, discusses valuable lessons from doctors and scientists, and shares stories from fellow survivors, family members, friends, and colleagues. Deborah and Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi.
Thank you, and give me just a minute because I mistakenly closed the presentation.
Oh no, it's okay.
Give us just a second.
No problem. Let's have a look in the chat while they do that. Oops, where did my chat go? Hi, Tom.
Okay, we're good.
So just before we go on, we have some hellos and howdies in our chat box. So we have Regina, Katie, Joan, everyone says hello. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Deborah and Steve.
Thank you so much.
And I am going to share our screen here in just a sec. All right, well, Deb, take it away.
Thank you so much. Really a pleasure to be here. My name is Deborah Meyerson. In 2010, I began lectures at Stanford like this: confident, strong, and casual. I encourage students to explore topics like gender, race, diversity, and identity. My name is Deborah Meyerson. In 2010, these words came out weak and difficult to understand. But these words are a huge achievement. My stroke robbed me of all speech. My name is Deborah Meyerson. Singing still helps me unlock my words. Who is Deborah Meyerson now? I'm alive. For this, I'm grateful and lucky. Many things have changed. I live with disabilities. My right hand doesn't work. I walk with a limp. My speech is really difficult. But some things haven't changed. I cherish the same values, love the same family, work the same determination. Losing my old life is the hardest part of my stroke. Rebuilding my identity as the stroke survivor with disabilities is the hardest part of my recovery. My stroke took so much of me: independence, career, control, and so much more. But I am a same person, so I had to get my capabilities back. For 3 years, I worked my ass off, the hardest job I ever had. With all this work, I still didn't regain all my capabilities. I couldn't be a Stanford professor anymore. My aphasia, my speech didn't let me do the job. Losing tenure was a huge blow. What do I do now? Who am I now? 3 years after my stroke, my identity crisis began. I struggled, really struggled. I went to the book I wrote in 2001, Tempered Radicals. The identity was the big part of my story. I realized my identity, understanding of identity could help me. I decided to write a book. This was academics do. Through I could, but it's came my learning journey. It took me 5 years. I learned this, accept lots of help. None of us told the emotional journey, rebuilding identity was so important to recovery. This is not just my story. With help, I interviewed more than 55 people, diverse ages, backgrounds, stroke types, and experience in life and stroke.
So I'm going to jump in and tell just a little bit more about the book. Deb mentioned that she decided to write a book. So she also mentioned that she was just as determined after the stroke as she was before. So what does someone do when they want to write a book? They sit down and they write a book. But of course, with pretty severe aphasia, that's not something that happens the same way it did when she wrote her book 10 years before. And so she looked for some help, and she looked for the closest person and the cheapest person she could find, and that was me. So for several months, she and I worked on what a book might look like, what she really wanted to say. But we realized that I had a full-time job, I was not a professional writer, and that we could use some help. And we fortunately found a woman named Sally Collings who lived in our neighborhood. She actually gave a presentation at our community rec center about telling personal stories. And we were able to bring her on board really to be Deb's partner in the process of drafting, outlining, interviewing, and then beginning to draft the book. It was about a year and a half, almost 2 years in, when Sally kind of delivered a first full draft of the book, and Deb and I and our oldest son, Danny, happened to be on vacation together, and we all read it with great excitement, thinking, okay, great, a little more editing and the book is done. But in fact, we read it and all had the same reaction, which was great stuff, but it doesn't have the message that we knew Deb was trying to convey. Deb didn't want this just to be a story about her and others' experience. She had wisdom to impart. Fortunately, our son Danny was in between jobs. He stepped in and said, hey, I'll kind of be your partner, Mom, to get this thing over the finish line. And he really played an instrumental role in taking it from that first draft to the book that's on the shelves today. and is the named co-author on the book. Another thing about the book, Deb mentioned the diversity of experiences that were covered. And I'm not going to take the time to tell a little bit about the stories of these three people who were among the 25 interviewed and included in the book. But what really is reflected in their stories is a great deal of diversity, both in terms of who they are, their backgrounds, and their experience, but also a lot of similarities. And really the two most powerful are that everybody we interviewed for the book worked tirelessly for years and sometimes decades and kept getting better. And we and lots of others often heard the trope of most of the recovery comes in the first 6 to 12 months. And it's true, recovery is fastest early on, but it keeps going. And Deb is still doing therapy today and still getting better. And that's a really important message of the book. The other was that none of the people we talked to really were told how important the emotional journey in recovery is. It was primarily about the physical journey. There was always mention of if you are depressed, you should see someone, if you have anxiety. But the talk was really of diagnosable mental conditions, as opposed to the fact that every survivor is going through a very difficult journey to really rebuild their identity and therefore a rewarding life. One other thing I'll share about the book, Deb included Maslow's hierarchy, and anyone who's taken Psychology 101 has probably seen this. But it was a really powerful realization that Deb's stroke kind of knocked her off the top rungs of the pyramid, where she was really fulfilling her dreams in life and had meaning and purpose, and knocked her all the way back to the bottom, where she needed help just with her basic needs, with survival, with food. But that once those basic needs got met, there was no reason. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Maslow didn't write this for people with disabilities or people who had strokes. It was just human nature to meet your basic needs first, but then begin to try to fulfill higher order needs. And that there was no reason Deb couldn't get right back on that pyramid and start climbing toward the top. And that was a really important realization. And I think the last thing I'll say about the book is not about the book itself, but about the journey. And Deb talked a little bit about, at first, she really wrote the book to prove she could. She was holding on to her identity as a professor and wanted to continue to live out that identity. But very quickly, she realized that that book writing process had put her on a very effective journey to really get in touch with her own emotions and rebuild her own identity in order to be able to rebuild her life in the face of disabilities. But even with that, there were several times during the writing process where she came downstairs and just said, I am done.
Yeah.
Forget this. I don't care if it never hits the shelves. And I often say it was such an incredibly brave thing to decide to write a book with severe aphasia, because Deb chose to put herself in front of her greatest and most frustrating disability every single day she woke up in the morning. But what really got her to keep pushing through and to not succumb to that desire to throw in the towel was that she realized that the book could help others. And that really gets back to Maslow's pyramid and the fact that having purpose, being able to contribute, is often the thing that drives people the most in life. And so in the end, this writing journey really reflects her personal journey to work her way through her own emotions and her own identity to build the life we have today. And I said that was going to be the last, but there is one more, and that is that we no, yes?
No.
And that is that chapter 9 of the book is titled Stroke is a Family Illness. And one of the things that we really embraced is that Deb's stroke didn't affect just Deb, it affected me, it affected our kids, and it didn't just affect our lives because of changes that Deb had to go through. It affected our identities as well and who we are as people. And so that's a really important message. And I start to get teary-eyed just talking about it, but chapter 9 starts with the story of our daughter, who was 15 when Deb had her stroke, and at 17, 2 years later, gave a talk to her school and talked really about how after Deb's stroke, she tried to be strong. And her model for strength was to be independent and go it alone and tough it out. She was an athlete. That's kind of a lot of what you do. But that she learned watching Deb and watching how Deb's community rallied and how Deb started to accept more help from the community, that she started to open up. And she really learned through that strength wasn't what she thought it was. Strength really was being able to let people in, being vulnerable. And of course, listening to our daughter give that talk, and we had absolutely no idea what she was going to talk about when we walked in to this full school assembly. It really made us realize yet again how important embracing stroke as a family illness really is. So Deb talked about the fact that understanding her identity was at the core of her emotional journey. And while she had to give up her faculty position at Stanford, that doesn't mean she had to give up teaching, and she still loves to share knowledge. So take it away, Deb.
Yeah. Before that I talk about identities, I want to share this process of preparing for the talk like this. I have so much to share. It's really difficult. For me, the hardest part about the aphasia is struggling to say what I want to say in work and life. To prepare, we write the content, Steve helps. I practice for hours. Even then, I can say all I want to say. Steve sears more complicated materials. I'm so glad he can, but I get mad at him a lot when we work together. I know it's not mad at him, but mad at my situation. This is life now, but I won't let me the aphasia still my voice. So here I go. Let's talk about identities. We all have multiple identities. I had to remember I am more than the job at Stanford. I'm a mother, wife, daughter, and friend. I love biking, skiing, walking, sailing. Kicking, no. I had to remember that all these things, it makes me me. Identities change. We are changing all the time. Right before the stroke, I was the same, not the same person I was 4 or 5 years before, or 10 years before. My stroke changed me faster, but I'm changing anyway. Identity is the social construct. We are who we are, and the context of relationships. My relationships, my family, friends, colleagues are key in rebuilding my life. Most important, identity is the choice. And instead of asking who I am now, ask who who do I want to be now? Your sense of self, your identity is profoundly affected of the situation, your race, gender, ethnicity, and more. See.
So it turns out that 5 years of work and publishing a book was just the beginning. We realized that this void existed in the emotional journey in rebuilding identity as part of recovery, and that we were going to try to do something about it. So I'm going to, hopefully this will work, to share just a short video that introduces the work that we and some colleagues are doing now. And let's see if this.
In 2010, Deborah Meyerson was a professor at Stanford University, working on issues like gender, diversity, and identity.
I'm really happy to be here. I spoke at a Net Impact conference.
She was also a happily married mother of 3, healthy, fit, and athletic. Then, a severe stroke nearly killed her, leaving her paralyzed on the right side and with no speech at all.
Deborah. My name is Deborah. My name is Deborah.
For 3 years, Deborah pursued every avenue for therapy possible. Despite great progress, she could not return to her job as a professor, mostly because of her ongoing speech challenges. That led Deborah to ask, who am I now? Drawing on her background studying identity, Deborah and her family began to explore their identities, and the emotional journey they now know was critical to rebuilding a rewarding life in the face of disabilities. That was an integral part of the 5-year process to write Identity Theft, Rediscovering Ourselves After Stroke. More than a book about Deborah, Identity Theft is built on academic research and interviews with more than 50 survivors, family care partners, and professional caregivers. While writing the book, Deborah and her husband, Steve Zuckerman, heard time and again that survivors and their families get little help navigating their emotional journeys. So they have created a nonprofit called Stroke Onward to bring awareness, develop resources, and ultimately change caregiving systems to embrace the emotional journey as an integral part of the recovery process. Deb and Steve are adapting their life personally and professionally to continue enjoying what they love, and by building Stroke Onward, trying to make the stroke recovery system better for the millions who will, unfortunately, be forced onto that path in the years to come. Please join us to learn, collaborate, and create a better healthcare system together.
So that's just sort of a quick introduction, and I'm not going to spend much time on these slides. You can read what our mission is, but it really is focused on, our real vision is that 10 years from now or 20 years from now, survivors and their families will encounter a stroke care system where this issue of the emotional journey and rebuilding identity is just integrated into the care that everyone receives. We kind of talked about the fact that in the video, that ultimately our goal down on the bottom of the pyramid is really to change the system. But along the way, we want to create and share resources that are helpful to survivors, their families, other professional caregivers. And our model really is to collaborate with others. And we hope that by doing so, whatever work we do can get magnified and impact more people. Our strategy really is threefold. Because the real core problem is that most people don't think about this and don't recognize it as a problem. Raising awareness is kind of step one. Probably the most notable thing, in addition to doing presentations like this, we have a column with the American Stroke Association every other month that goes out to their newsletter. So we're just looking for any and every opportunity to talk about this issue and help bring people onto the journey. Creating and sharing resources. One of the most significant projects we've done thus far is to create book group discussion guides for different populations, for survivors, for families, for professional caregivers, for the general public, to use identity theft and take the learnings deeper and try to make it more meaningful. And lastly, changing the system. And in many ways, that's just going to be the accumulation of all of our work over years. But we're trying to take some discrete steps. One of them is we're working with a number of collaborators at universities to see how the book and the messages in the book can be built into the training curriculum in degree granting programs for speech therapy, for physical therapy, occupational therapy, neurology, so that, again, the next generation of caregivers just sees this as part of the caregiving process. And, you know, we've been at it about 2 years. We just published our first impact report. It's going to be on our website shortly. But there's just so much to do. So, you know, we've barely scratched the surface, and we're continuing. I will, Deb insisted that I just share one thing going forward. We are in the planning stages of trying to do a stroke awareness ride to bring awareness to stroke, to aphasia, to the need for more focus on the emotional journey. So if you're interested, make sure you sign up for our mailing list, and you'll learn more as we get our Stroke Across America tour planned for starting next summer. And now I'm going to let Deb take us home.
People ask me what helps me most. These help me a lot. Look forward, but take time to accept my loss. Focus on small wins. They add up. They help me rebuild. The recovery means focusing on most important things in life, not regaining my old life. Focus on meaning and purpose, and appreciate the short on my life. My husband, family, friends. For some, it's religion. Whatever helps me most. My journey is full of challenges. I'm building a different kind of career. I have new limits, but I am again an active mother, partner, and athlete. I am still rebuilding my identity and rebuilding my life. So who am I now? I'm a stroke survivor. I am frustrated, really more than used to be, but I'm lucky to be alive. I have great support and building a new life. I have purpose and meaning again. I am committed to helping other survivors and their care partners. To be clear, we are not figured it out. We are still on their journey, and we can life. Thank you.
So those are comments, and I think we're going to stop sharing our screen, and we've got some time for questions.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for writing the book. I also got teary-eyed reading your daughter's words.
Yeah.
This book is just so touching and inspiring. And I know I've said this before, but this book means so much to me. And I believe that this is shared with the people in our chat because there are just so many nice messages in the chat box as well. One of our audience members emailed that the book resonated strongly with his own experience. And I see a few similar comments in the chat box. So thank you.
Thank you.
One of our first
the audiobook is here.
I think Deb's just saying that one of the things that was really important to her when we picked a publisher was to pick a publisher that would produce an audiobook from day one, knowing that one of the most important audiences for the book was people with aphasia, and that is often a very important tool in being able to absorb something like the book. So it's out there.
Actually, that was brought up in our book club today, in the National Aphasia Association's book club. Some of the members were saying how sometimes it's easier to read the book while you're listening to the audiobook at the same time.
Yeah.
So I also want to mention that the video that we watched is in the chat box. So if anyone is interested, you could always check that link. I will also put strokeonward.org in the chat box for anyone who wants to check that out. Okay, so our first few questions comes from Mark in Iowa. He teaches computer science and had a stroke in 2019. Through therapy, he can now talk, spell, type, and program. And in the fall of 2020, he returned to work. Before I go into his questions, I'd like to just share that he spoke so highly of you guys and of the book in his email.
Okay,
so he's wondering, are you still making improvements, and what have you been doing recently?
I am, Joan is here. Joan is my speech therapy. And I am 11 years after my stroke, and occupational therapy and physical therapy is really, I'm really improving slowly. And not everyone has research, the
resources.
Yeah,
and that's, long term, it's not first on our list because it's so hard, but so many people who have the good fortune of having insurance coverage lose it fairly quickly, that just the insurance industry doesn't treat stroke as a condition that deserves therapy for the rest of your life, which it really should. And we hope maybe over some longer period of time, we can make a dent in changing that. It's interesting because very often we don't see the improvement, and it's not until we see somebody that we haven't seen in 6 months or a year for them to say, oh my God, you're walking so much more comfortably, or your speech is so much more fluid than the last time I saw you. And so there's no question it still can improve.
In the book, you write about small wins. In moments that you were feeling very down, how did you recognize those small wins?
That's really a good question. The small wins is half a step.
Want me to help?
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard. And I actually think that sometimes that's something for care partners and friends and family, because I think sometimes that's the problem. A survivor just wants to get it all back, get back to where they were. And it's hard to, on your own say, okay, I know I want to get back to where I was, but I'm going to break it down into little pieces. Whereas the people around you can say, hey, let's celebrate. You took your first step.
Yeah.
Let's set a goal that isn't about getting back to where you were, and then celebrate that goal when it happens. I used to joke that it was about, even after Deb wrote the book, I would frequently say when she was getting frustrated, there's a really great book out there you should read. Because it's hard.
Yeah.
You have to be reminded, because we all want to get to the real goal in one shot.
And it's 11 years ago, I'm running, and now I'm walking to I am walking slowly.
Yeah.
In your book, we also meet Malik, a fellow survivor, except his story is really different from many of the other survivors in that his grief and disappointment stays with him. This question, I think, is for both you and Steve. What can a care partner do to help situations similar to Malik's, where we know the goal is to get to that post-trauma growth, but the person with aphasia is finding it difficult to look past the disappointment?
Yeah. It's the 6 years, no, 3 years. I am not in touch now, and
yeah, I mean, I think this is where the grief literature was really helpful, because some degree of acceptance, really, there has to be some acceptance to be able to move forward. And I think for some people, if that's not there, we're not professional counselors. I think that's a place really for professional help. If somebody is just really stuck and can't get past what happened and accept it at all, and therefore is not able to move forward with any different view of the world, probably a place for professional help. For people who are stuck in smaller ways than just that encouragement.
Yeah.
And I think really focusing, one of Deb's big ahas when writing the book was really focusing on the deeper meaning of what it was you used to love.
Yeah.
So in Deb's case, how do I not focus on being a professor as what's important to me, but the ability to create and share knowledge? That's what being a professor means. That's what got her into it in the first place. And that opened the door to say, okay, are there other ways I can achieve that meaning? And so that may be something where for care partners to really help survivors that you're supporting, think about the deeper meaning and the values that they had in their old lives, as opposed to the titles and the positions as a way of trying to get unstuck.
Yeah.
You wrote about first thinking of stroke as a temporary status. When and how did that change for you?
3 years after the diagnosis, and I am the 3 years, and I didn't. I am the tenure is. I am. Tenure is 3 years in I don't know. Yeah.
It was really 3 years after Deb's stroke when she ran out of runway on the medical leave policy at Stanford and had to give up her tenured position. And that really was the kind of the moment of, I guess we can't call this a blip anymore. Because it changed something so fundamental in her life that was now going to be hard to go back to, even if she continued to get better. So that was really the trigger point for Deb. But
and the book is I 1 year after 1 year after the medical leave, I am the book is started
to write the book. And that was really her first step forward. And we talk a fair amount about different survivors focus their energy on on rehabilitation. How much of your time and energy do you focus trying to get your capabilities back? And how much of your time and focus is spent trying to adapt to what you have and rebuild your life in the face of that? And that for Deb, it was like 100% the first for 3 years. And it wasn't until after 3 years that she started to build in some more of that adaptation. And writing the book was really the first major step in that direction.
Thank you. As Linda in our chat section asks, what do you think is the most challenging factor for you?
What's the most challenging thing for you?
Writing, no, the writing and speaking is really, I am not, I am I am fine reading and speaking and writing is really.
Kitty asks, how old were you when you had your stroke?
53. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we did talk a little bit about insurance. And in the book, you touch on how varying socioeconomic status affects treatment and care. Do you know of any organized efforts to make therapy more accessible, especially financially?
It's really, no. And no, it's really it's really, the insurance is really.
I mean, we think that's one of the big problems in the system. And this goes beyond stroke. This is our whole medical system and the insurance system, and the fact that even if you haven't, that some people don't have insurance, which is horrible, that even if you have it, you invariably have to fight to get what you are entitled to. And what you're entitled to is set in ways that don't reflect what real recovery means. And so there really needs to be more. So, that is just such a huge problem, and one that, again, it will take not years, but decades, but we hope through our work and collaborating with others who are more explicitly policy focused, that we can make a difference there. And I think, for those survivors who are listening, finding ways to bring your voice to the table, ultimately will probably be very, very important in creating change. And, we hope that over time, we will do more of that to collect those voices and organize those voices. We don't really have anything going on to do that actively right now.
And Australia and England, really, and Canada, really a lot ahead of this United States.
I'd also like to mention that the National Aphasia Association has some online social groups. I remember your book had talked a little bit about social groups and social activities and the importance of them in treatment and care. I think it was Rose and Randy who even started their own social group. So for anyone in our audience who would like to collaborate on a social group, please reach out to me. I'm going to put my email in the chat and we can try to get something started. Let's see. Oh, you also talked a bit about pushing yourself so hard in therapy. Did you ever get tired? And when you did get tired, what did you do?
No, I don't. I am this. Some days are better than other days. I am not tired at all. No, not therapy.
I mean, Deb is just a natural workhorse. And in fact, working really hard and being tired was really important to her mental state. And in fact, particularly early on in her recovery, the therapists were constantly telling her, you will make more progress if you go slower, because your brain just isn't capable of learning as fast as you're trying to push it to learn. So we kind of had the mantra, go slow to go fast. And that was something that we had to constantly remind Deb of. So, for her, and again, every stroke is different. We know people for whom fatigue is a real problem. That wasn't, fortunately for Deb, that wasn't her issue.
Steve, we have some questions for you, but first, what word do you both prefer for your role? Caregiver, care partner?
We kind of adopted care partner for a bunch of reasons. One, we had built our relationship as a partnership from the beginning, and we didn't want the fact that Deb had a stroke to sort of change that, to make me the giver in the relationship and her the taker in the relationship, which is the implicit flip side of giver. And then the other is just this issue. There are so many places in the system where people either intentionally or inadvertently take agency away from the survivor and make the survivor kind of a passenger in the recovery process. And I think for Deb, from the very beginning, I mean, she was still in the ICU and didn't have any words, when she was using her hands and gestures to berate nurses who would be talking about her to me and her mom in front of her as if she didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I think that that was one of the things that really drove us to adopt the care partner phrase, to say to anyone who was listening, Deb's part of this equation here. She's a partner in her care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience as a care partner?
Do we have 6? No, just kidding. You know, I think there's so much and it's so hard. And again, it's so different for everyone. One, I was really lucky in that I had a lot of support for me to be able to be of better and more support for Deb. And also to be able to get back to some parts of my pre-stroke life sooner because there was other support, which then enabled me, I think, to be better support for Deb because I wasn't living it 24/7. I had some escapes from it. But I think, you know, 2 things I'll say. One is it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so care partners need to take care of themselves. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's impossible if there is no other way. And I feel deeply for the people who truly don't have anybody to tag to take over for a little while. But I'd encourage people to really be creative in ways to get additional support, to do whatever things recharge you as a person, so that then you can come back to being a care partner with that energy. And I think the second is what I sometimes call the 6 magic words that for some ridiculous reason, it took me 3 years to figure out. But as a care partner, we always want to help and make things easier for somebody who's struggling, but sometimes helping isn't wanted and isn't needed. And I did go through a phase where I felt like I could not do anything right. If I rushed to hold the door open for Deb, she'd get mad at me because she wanted to do it herself and show that she was independent. And if I didn't rush to open the door, she'd look at me with these eyes as if to say, you know, what the heck here? I need some help. I've got a disability. And so my 6 magic words are, would you like me to help?
Yeah.
And that actually changed the dynamic pretty dramatically and positively. So that would be one sharing for the care partners listening to try.
What really stood out to me in the book was this like idea of layers of care partners. So you help the person, you give care in and you ask for care out. I think that was just such a beautiful visual. As a main communication partner, what were some of the things that you learned to help? What were some of the things you learned to do to help with communication?
Well, do you want me to help was a big one.
Yeah.
I think even before that, just giving Deb time, not being comfortable with silence, and then also candidly working very closely with speech therapists and aphasia experts to say what is most effective. And so, you know, we went through different phases where mouthing the first syllable of a word to help Deb get going was really helpful. But then they got to the point where she didn't want that. She wanted to come up with that sound herself. And so, you know, like so many other things, a lot of it was about communication and trying to understand both from the experts and from Deb what would be most helpful, not what I thought would be most helpful, but what they thought would be most helpful.
And the really, I am really, I am really, I am
not flowing.
Yeah. Sometimes it's.
Now that's that's Deb's reality, is sometimes the speech flows better and sometimes it flows less well. And that's frustrating.
At one point, the book recommends that people with aphasia come right out and say, I have a speech disorder, when in social settings, especially with strangers, but it doesn't mention the idea of an aphasia card. And so this audience member would like to know if that idea came up in therapy and if you ever used an aphasia ID card.
No, travel flights.
We sort of created our own version of that when Deb started traveling again, so that if she couldn't communicate something that was important, I had written out the basics of her itinerary, that she has aphasia, what that means, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, one of the things is sometimes people talk about, it's hard to be assertive when your speech is impaired. That was never Deb's problem. And, and one of the first speech therapists she worked with when she was really beginning to develop language again, taught her to say, let me talk.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of Deb's aphasia card.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the writing process. We only have a few more minutes, but we did get a few questions about this. So how did you find the people that you interviewed for your book?
Oh, it's really the Bay Area is I am a PSA, the Stroke Association. I am the board member, and so no, the St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean, we, it started building off our own network, people we met doing therapy of various kinds, and talked to and asked, and they said, sure. Deb was participating in programs for the Pacific Stroke Association and then later joined their board. And so met some people through there. We had a lot of relationships in Boston, and Deb did a program for 4 months in Boston. So we met people there. When we really got to building the sample and wanted more diversity, we reached out to a handful of professional colleagues or references from other professional colleagues in other places around the country.
Yeah.
Deb mentioned St. Louis. And so it really was just a process of reaching out, explaining what we were doing, and seeing if there were folks who might be interested in participating.
Do you have any insight on finding a book agent or a publisher?
No, I have a publisher. The first publisher I fired. And the second publisher.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have any magic answers there. This woman, Sally Collings, who knew her way around the publishing world, helped us find an agent who, we crafted a proposal and pitched 20 or 30 agents to see if they'd take it on, and found one that we liked, who was willing to take it on. They found the first publisher, who, as Deb said, it was largely because he wouldn't agree up front to do an audiobook. He said, let's see how the book does, and then we'll decide. That was the biggest reason. We just decided to not move forward before we got started. And then ultimately found a publisher through a personal relationship. So no magic there. Publishing's hard.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. We are out of time, but did you have any final thoughts or messages that you'd like to say to our audience?
Really appreciate it, and thank you so much.
Yeah, and just, for those of you who are survivors, keep up the hard work. Care partners, thanks for what you do. And if anybody wants to get involved in our work, let us know through the website. We hopefully together we can make a difference and make it a little easier, both for survivors that are out there now, but also for the future.
Thank you, Deborah, Steve. Thank you for chatting with us today. To our audience, thank you for sending in such thoughtful questions and for being with us. For more information on aphasia, to find today's recording, and for more information on future events, please visit us at aphasia.org. We have some great resources on there. Our next Ask the Expert is on aphasia and technology. And then in November, we have who I believe is a friend of yours, because she does make a guest appearance in your book, Julia Fox Garrison, who will be talking to us about her book, Don't Leave Me This Way, or When I Get Back on My Feet, You'll Be Sorry. Debra Meyerson and Steve Zuckerman, the book is Identity Theft, Rediscovering Ourselves After Stroke. This is Ask the Author. I hope to see you at the next one. Thank you and take care.
Thank you.